pushing for a lower dev estimate is like negotiating better weather with a meteorologist. Oh, I like that one. It's a good analogy. There's back and forth as the estimates are questioned for being too high, almost never for being too low. Yep. Often stakeholders outside of the development team with limited technical know-how, emphasis on limited technical know-how, or insights into the code base, question team estimates, saying something like, "No, it's less effort than that." Their purpose is to push the team to give a better estimate. Note that better in this case means a lower estimate. The problem with going down this path and taking part in these discussions is diminished trust and further issues down the line. Finally, an agreed upon estimate is provided with much grumbling. Most of the time, nobody is happy, everybody feels compromised. The most important stakeholder, the business, is especially compromised as a bad expectation was set on when the software will be delivered to the customer. Both quotes are from the article, "Is tasking developers with creating detailed estimates a waste of money?" In this post, I will share how it's a mistake for external stakeholders to push for a lower estimate without new facts impacting the effort. In addition, I will share how development teams can move their stakeholder dialogue into a much more productive discussion. Does pushing for lower estimates make sense? No. If it's been estimated already, there's a reason behind the estimation. No amounts of "please" or "can you be faster" is going to decrease the workload. It stays the same. The same amount of work needs to be done. No, it's less effort than that. Statements pushing for a low estimate can be valid, especially when discussing a story with a colleague in your team and when it's backed up with facts. However, if the stakeholder making this claim is not part of the development team and doesn't know what needs to happen when implementing the story and doesn't bring any new facts, then making this claim is like starting a conversation with the meteorologist, saying, "Hey, meteorologist, the weather forecast for tomorrow will not be this bad." Let's cover why this is so and how to move the discussion forward. Pushing for a lower estimate is like negotiating better weather with a meteorologist. The fact is, the meteorologist doesn't control the weather, and the programmer does not control time. The meteorologist uses his knowledge and observing data to forecast how the weather will be. The programmer sometimes guesses. In the same way, the development team doesn't control the actual effort, only by a tiny part. The development team is using their knowledge and data to forecast expected effort. They use established team velocity, review data on complete stories, and continuously improve their process every sprint. It's not a defined science. Hence why estimates are mostly guesses. What do I mean by saying only by a tiny part? The team can skip parts of the process and deliver lower quality software. Not a recommended practice, as often teams pay more later when using the strategy. Also, the team has ways to improve the velocity. However, teams need to base estimates on the current throughput and not expected future throughput when giving an estimate. In other words, the team has minimal control over its effort to implement a fixed set of functionality. We only have two hands. Next time, when someone starts a conversation about your team's estimate, pushing for a lower estimate without any new insights that will lower the effort, ask them, "Do you ever tell the meteorologist it isn't going to be this bad weather tomorrow?" No. Because negotiating an estimate is like negotiating better weather with a meteorologist. Doesn't make any sense. However, there's a better discussion to have. The discussion you need to have instead: building software is complicated, often takes more time than people think, and therefore stakeholders often expect lower effort and can't rationalize spending more than a specific amount. What then? In these cases, discuss with your stakeholders why the estimated effort is this much, what part of the story takes the most time, where are the biggest unknowns. In addition, discuss ways to slice up the story and deliver it in multiple parts. Validate each part early, preferably using prototypes. Careful though, those prototypes can turn into production types. In addition, Find ways to leave parts of the story out, especially the features that require lots of effort and have the least value. This approach makes sense because research shows that a large part of software functionality built is rarely used. Therefore, it's critical to get out of the building and talk to the actual users using the software, because it's often the case stakeholders base their thoughts on opinions rather than actual data or discussions with users. As Steve Lang often says, no facts exist inside a building, only opinions. What do the people on Reddit have to say? This is just one of a whole collection of estimation games devs regularly find themselves having to play in the hellscape we call Agile. My thoughts exactly. I call it the guessing game. 2 by the way. 9-2 by the way. Links in chat. This other article, 8 points for one team is 2 points for another team. Interesting. Is this referring to the expertise of the members in your team? A team of experts is gonna beat a team of noobs. Gonna be able to do things faster, more efficiently. At least that's the base rule. I've some pretty shitty devs, pretty senior devs. Anyway, is Agile a giant meme? Yes, of course it is. Any software developer dealing with Agile realizes this after a couple of months, maybe even weeks. I'm strongly leaning towards yes. Modern Agile has seemingly almost nothing in common with the original manifesto for Agile software development, which is worthy of a separate article. In my ongoing quest to explore the problems that are endemic to modern software development, I decided to focus, in particular, on estimation and the disaster that is story pointing. Oh boy, you mean guesstimation? The main problem with estimates is that estimates are always based on guesswork. You're always guessing. You can make a claim that estimates are based on observing past behavior, but the fact is that what you're implementing is something that hasn't been implemented before. What's in a story point anyway? Story points are units of measure for expressing an estimate of the overall effort required to fully implement a product backlog item or any other piece of work. Teams assign story points relative to work complexity, the amount of work and risk or uncertainty. By Atlassian, we have to thank for Jira's existence. Thank you! Hello, you there. WTF? I agree with you. Agile is a clusterfuck. My cloth? What you talking about? What, you're talking about, you're talking about my shorts, right? This, right? I'm not naked. Just chatting without a shirt on. And that is completely not against the terms of service. It would be if I were a woman. But I'm a privileged white male that can read. So what's the idea behind story points? The scale is used where the lower bound is considered the easy work, while the upper bound is considered the hard work. What easy and hard work means is subjective and depends on the team. For example, I consider work that is vague or needs further research to be an unknown and therefore hard, and thus assigned a higher value. Already, perhaps a problem becomes evident. Estimations are guesses. That's about it. There's no formal way of calculating story points. It's not math. Misuse of story points. In my experience, I've found that certain agile proponents have an ever-present dogmatic and overbearing view of all things agile, to the point of resisting change. This is ironic, as agile is supposed to be about adapting to change, hence the word agile. It's anti-agile. How many of these anti-patterns sound familiar? So far I've been able to relate with almost everything, maybe everything. Failing to realize story points are an estimate. Despite the phrase story point estimate, there are often cases where stakeholders seem totally oblivious to the estimate part. Emphasis on totally. In other cases, the assigned story point value is often taken to be the exact amount of effort required to implement the backlog item. What about when the story points are the exact number of hours you're gonna spend on that task? pressuring or coercing developers into choosing a lower number. Don't you love when they start bargaining? Pressure being applied to developers in order to make them feel like they have no choice except to estimate a lower amount of effort in order to be left alone and avoid the stress of being singled out. Even worse, then blaming the developer at the end of the sprint when work takes longer than estimated. How could this happen? How could it be? Could it be that even though the estimate was lowered, the developer still had to do the exact same amount of work? Immediately discounting high or low numbers. Similar to the previous point, immediately disregarding any estimates that are an outlier compared to the other team members. The score, wildly different to the average, usually means one of two things: that either they didn't understand the scope of the work, or that they have unique insights and concerns about the task. Sounds fair. Some stakeholders ignore those insights and concerns because they are inconvenient. Comparing and judging developers' workloads based on the total points. This is a terrible practice that only leads to resentment and unfair representations of workloads, and gamification. Anyone who recognizes the system for what it is just gonna exploit it. Sometimes a developer completing many tasks with smaller estimates are perceived as doing more work than a developer completing tasks with higher estimates that take longer to implement. You gotta understand, you're dealing with humans that don't understand what you do, but they do understand numbers. If it looks like if you completed 5 tasks, even though they had lower estimates, while your coworker only completed 1 task that had a high estimate, you still completed more tasks than your coworker. That's what they see. So a smart player plays the game right. Both developers are contributing, yet one gets little to no acknowledgement. The poor schmuck. Treating story point estimations as hard, immutable facts. Once an agreement has been made over how many points a story is to have, there's no way to update the value of it, as more discoveries are made without unnecessary drama and arguments. It's almost as if software development is you implementing a feature and then realizing that, I actually need to do this in a different way to make it work. But the suits don't like to hear that. Doesn't play nicely with the game that they set up. Of course, this should not be the case, as changing is supposed to be part of the manifesto. It inevitably leads to everyone estimating higher values in order to get breathing room. Big brain move. Berating developers when they realize a story was over or underestimated. Yes, they didn't play the game right. Whip them. Whip them good. Similar to the previous point, discouraging and discrediting developers for their estimates, often on a regular basis. Some good old-fashioned bullying. This needs to stop. 30+ minute debates to decide if a story should be 1 or 2 points. In those 30 minutes, you could have done some progress. Long and protracted discussions are sometimes needed. That's just life and the nature of development. Perhaps the bigger picture system architecture needs to be considered. Maybe this is a concern. An approach could lead to a technical debt and highly coupled code. On the other hand, some of the debates around whether an easy task should be assigned 1 or 2, etc. points are captures and a waste of time and patience. Let me give you guys the link. The link's in chat now. So you want to read it yourself, or share with a friend, or you got the balls. Your boss! Let me know how it goes.